Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast about the A-League, Premier League and more. My name's Tommie C and it's great to be back for our A-League season 21-22 season review podcast. This is one of my favourites because it's an opportunity to sort of look back at everything that's happened this year, good and bad, and just sort of revel in the season that was. Joining me this week on the pod, though, is Colby and Damo. Boys, with the Premier League finished, with the A-League finished, what have you been doing with all of your spare time now?
Not watching enough football, Tommie. I can't say I'm willing to go to the depths of the J League or I don't know, whatever other football's kicking around. I'm like hanging out for, I suppose, the World Cup and maybe the soccer games beforehand. Yeah.
So safe to say, Colby, you didn't watch the Olyroos overnight?
Nah. Oh wait, I did see Alu Kual's scorpion kick though.
Yeah, what's with that? Is the only thing we're exporting to the world now is scorpion
kicks. Yeah.
And Damo, what about you, mate? What have you been doing in your spare time?
Very similar. I don't have much spare time with a toddler running around at the moment, though, so that takes up all of my time. But yeah, not making time for football. That's what I've been doing.
Fair enough. All right. As someone who doesn't have a child or one on the way, I do want to throw out that I did watch Wollongong Wolves get almost touched up by Sydney FC NPL today. That was a bit of fun.
Of course you did.
To be honest, it was the first time I've actually sat down and watched like a whole game on NPL TV, and it was surprisingly good, or at least the NPL app itself. So, cool. But anyway, look, onto the A-League review pod today. And look, those are familiar with the format for how we do this will know that we go through some of the themes of the season, and then we'll do our infamous or famous check the tape segment. And then we will go through each team, how they performed this season, and maybe some highlights and lowlights. And that's the episode. So, look, we're going to start with some themes from this season. First of all, the first one I want to touch upon is COVID and scheduling. It was a first year of simultaneous kickoffs on Saturday nights and also the debut of two-legged semi-finals. We had the February Festival of Football that fell flat, unfortunately. But look, I think all of this sort of does come down to the fact that of the 226 games, 113 of them, so pretty much half of the games this year, had to be rescheduled in some way or another. Boys, do you think anything could have been done about how this rescheduling en masse was handled?
I don't see how anything could have been done about that. Yeah, with COVID wreaking havoc to the start of the season, and with borders closed and things like that happening. I mean, short of playing more simultaneous fixtures on weekends, but you can't help just having to reschedule some of these games. It just was what it was essentially at the start of the season.
And I guess probably you remember sort of in the peak of reschedule mania was that people just didn't know that games were on, particularly in that February period where there were so many games. There was a game pretty much on every day, and that was sort of sold as a selling point for the league that, oh, this is going to be exciting. There's football on every day, team. But it just didn't really pan out that way. If anything, it kind of felt like a little bit like, sort of the Premier League period over Christmas, New Year, where there's just football on every day, and you're looking forward to a little bit of a break of it because it's not like during the World Cup where you have football on every day, but it's very structured. You've got sort of Group A through to F, and you know that your team's going to be playing again in sort of 5 or 6 days time, and it just didn't have that quite sort of festival of football atmosphere that they were kind of going for in that COVID era. So it was a little bit disappointing, but such is life, I guess. Like you said, Colby, it was not something they could do a hell of a lot about. Now, in terms of crowds, and this is something we probably talk about almost every year, I think, and it seems to be a very hot topic as far as the A-League goes. Expectations have had to be tempered with crowds down across all sporting codes at present. But boys, do you think the APL did enough to promote the league in this current sporting entertainment environment?
think we were just talking about the fixturing. I think that obviously played probably the biggest part in terms of crowds going to games. You said before, Tommie, at the start of the season, you couldn't keep up with when fixtures were being played, and so many that were postponed and rescheduled, and then you'd have to short turnaround and shuffle more games in. It was actually like that all season. There was games on Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday nights, and you've got no idea football was on until you sat down at 7:30 and were like, oh, there's a game on. Or you missed the game and go, I didn't realize there was a game tonight. And that was the case for many Victory, Woo, City home games that previously I may have gone to, not even realizing that they were on. So I think that played a huge part. And then just the fact of midweek games, midweek games always have had lower crowds, particularly in Australia. People don't want to go out of a late night on a school night and have to come home and doing that every week. It's just not fun, really.
It's curious that in the past we've sort of looked at Asian Champions League as something that hasn't really drawn crowds, and I think maybe we can put a bit of a nail in the coffin that people aren't interested in the ACL. It's just that they're on weeknights. I think that's the problem, and that sports goers don't want to go to a midweek game if it's basically just sort of a regular season fixture. What were your thoughts, Colby?
Yeah, it's a bit hard for the APL to do too much to, when they've had their hands tied by rescheduling. Like I found that either people like us, even that were following the league and doing a podcast on it, didn't know that the games were on, or if you did know that games were on and it was your team and you would have otherwise gone, it, like Damo said, it's like a Tuesday night or something like that, and especially if your team's playing in like a far out stadium like Brisbane Roar or Sydney. I know they had to trek out for games and others as well. So yeah, and that's not even to mention teams like Perth and Wellington not getting home games for much, if not all of the season. So it was
always even like the likes of the Woo playing out of Launceston, where I think it was into double digits, the crowd figure for that one apparently, and I think MacArthur had some pretty low drawing crowds as well this year as well. So just to echo your point, Colby, I think you guys give me a lot of shit because I seemingly am always across all of the football that's on. And I remember this year, I think I was meant to be catching up with you, Damo. I think it might have been Jesse. Sorry, we were meant to be catching up on a Monday night. I think it might have been in fact, it was a pod recording. And I, at 2:00 on a Monday night, said, "Sorry, mate, can't make it. I've just realised there's a City game on tonight, and I would like to go." And I was like, first of all, like the irony of saying that when you're recording a podcast for the competition that you're meant to be following. It's just, I mean, that was sort of how the season went, really, wasn't it? But look, I guess there were some bright sparks. We did see at the very end of the season, the Bring a Mate challenge was brought in at Central Coast and Newcastle, and that was something that seemed as though that the punters kind of responded to, and we can say that the A-League hasn't always had a history of having promotions that the punters have actually responded to. So that was good, and that'd be interesting to see if the A-League brings that back in some sort of capacity for other games as well. Something like that with I think the Woo or Newcastle or some of those regional teams, I think could really benefit from something like that. Boys, what did we think in terms of the promotion of active support or the health of active support in the league right now?
Grim.
Yeah, I mean that's always been one of what the A-League has done well to bring people to grounds. If people don't want to come to watch the football, they come to watch the fans. And I think if you go back to when the A-League had its biggest average crowd per season, which was probably about 10 years ago now, which was nearly triple what the average crowd was this season, which, by the way, was the lowest average attendance of any A-League season of all time, just over 5,000 people. So not one single team had an average crowd of more than 10,000 people for this season. And I'm sure, I think, Colby, you've got probably some more numbers on sort of how grim this was. And I think active support's a huge part of that. People used to come to watch the crowd. Now you feel like you go, and if the game's not there, you're sitting around with 95% of the stadium empty, and you may as well be doing that at home.
Yeah, Damo, like exactly right. And just to emphasize that point, not one team, so this is including the Wanderers, the Victory, Sydney FC, cracked an average of 10,000 people. That is just wild when, like, and I just have to keep, this is just the example that occurs to me just because I was in Melbourne at the time when the Raw were playing away in Melbourne. Like, there was like 2 or 3 seasons there, and you know, of course, there were like 50 Raw fans, but then the stadium was like 25,000 Melbourne Victory fans when we'd be playing them away. And this was just for a Raw game, not a derby, not a Sydney, not a Big Blue, nothing. So, and to, you know, that they haven't even cracked that, including derbies, is just, it just really underlines where the whole league's at.
So it's interesting you brought up those big crowds. I think I sent some pictures to our group chat just earlier in the week, which was I found on my phone of when I first moved to Melbourne. I went to the first 3 Melbourne derbies that when I lived here, which just so happened to be 3 sellouts in a row, 2 at Docklands and 1 at Amy Park. If you combine those 2 Melbourne Victory home games at Docklands of 55,000 people each game, you know, that's 110,000 people in 2 games. If 0 people turned up to their other 10 home games of the season, that's already a bigger average attendance than their crowds this season. So
yeah,
you know, that's the kind of areas we're looking at in terms of decrease in fans. This game was a sellout every single time, and now you're struggling to sell out Amy Park for a Melbourne Victory home game derby.
The other side of the coin, obviously, is this is a league-wide average and a sport-wide average, like Tommie mentioned, I think, a moment ago. Like, you can't understate the impact that COVID's had and the fixture rescheduling has had, because both of those things, like, yeah, we're not through it yet. We need consistent fixtures. I think, you know, that just, you can't state that highly enough.
Well, I mean, just to emphasize that point, Colby, the AFL, which is known as having, I think, the 3rd largest average attendance for, you know, league-wide average attendance of any sporting league in the world, have their lowest average crowd attendance since 1994 this season. So that's saying something. They've just been going up and up and up every year, and their attendance is lower than it's been for nearly 30 years.
I think in this space, it's going to be really interesting to see what the APL do early on in the next season, particularly with promotion and sort of deals and tie-ins with the media, because I guess if there's one thing that Danny Townsend and his team have demonstrated, or at least spoken to, it's that they don't plan on sitting on their hands. They plan on that there's going to be some tangible action which will target specifically crowds. And there's been a little bit of talk about those 35 identified marquees, and that could be one way that they look to sort of get people back into the grounds. But I guess marquees can be hit and miss, as we've seen this season with Daniel Sturridge, right? So hopefully they, I guess, take a diversified approach to getting punters back in, and I think active support is really key to that. And I think it dovetails really well with marquees. You take a variety of approaches to get people back into the ground. So I think hopefully, go on.
Active support, Tommie, yeah, like critical to get that right. Like active support, but just the simplest thing, having fixtures in the calendar that don't move. It's like, it's
on
just
the weekend.
It's just so simple. Fixtures in the weekend that don't move, and stadiums that don't change. Like, people know where the game is and people know when the game is. Like,
at least if it gets to a Thursday afternoon and you go, hey, I wonder when my team are playing this weekend.
And where they're playing.
And you know where it's going to be.
That's something that we haven't talked about either, because that's been going on a little bit longer than COVID, with, like, you know, certain teams, being a bit of a traveling circus. And, you know, we've had the Woo, much publicized, haven't, you know, like, really delayed in breaking ground on their new stadium that they'll own. But then you've had Sydney, who are redoing Allianz Stadium or Allianz Arena, or whatever the fuck it's called. They've been playing out of different stadiums. The Raw, Suncorp got too expensive, so they've been playing out at Redcliffe and training, and God knows where in Queensland, wherever they haven't been kicked out yet. Like all of these teams, the Knicks not being able to go back home, like Perth playing out of different stadiums, and it's looking like they're going to be like relegated to Subiaco or somewhere next season. It's just not good enough, and it's really, really hurting. Like people just getting into a good rhythm of supporting their team, and that's what you need for like rusted on supporters, and that's what's going to encourage people to bring their mates, because they're going to be going in the first place.
Yeah, well said, mate. I think I did notice this week, Melbourne City, they were sending out their membership email sort of drum up promotion, trying to get people to sign up already, which is wild considering the season only just ended and won't start again for another 6 months. But they guaranteed that all fixtures would be on weekends, so Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Hopefully Sunday afternoon. They didn't rule out Sunday night games, but still that is a very small step in the right direction though. So good signs there. Moving on though, next up we're going to look at Paramount Plus and Channel 10. This season saw the first season of a new era at Channel 10 and Paramount Plus in their relationship with the A-League. It didn't quite go to plan though, with delays in getting native Paramount Plus apps on TV, lack of delayed start or pause and rewind functionality, drinks breaks for ads, then ads during natural breaks, including the low point for the coverage, which was cutting to an ad and missing a goal in the elimination final between Adelaide and the Knicks. There were positive, though. Georgie Omandale, Neve Owen, Daniel Georgievski and Robbie Thompson will welcome newcomers to a refreshed and balanced coverage team, while Simon Hill returned to our screens after a few years away from the A-League. A Monday night highlight show was rolled out quickly, but the new panel show, Round Ball Rules, was only rolled out about 3/4 of the way through the season, which was a little bit disappointing. I think I've come up with a reasonably comprehensive list of pros and cons of the coverage, but did you guys enjoy the coverage this year? Would you give the overall package a pass or a fail?
Look, I enjoyed the panel. I thought there's a couple of really good additions, people who gave some really good insight, particularly Bruce Gite, Luke Wilkinson, I thought were particularly really good to listen to. Wilkshire, sorry, not Wilkinson. And yeah, like, so they're really good additions. But I think on the whole, the broadcast quality was there, but the delivery of what was the service, or the delivery of what was the product, just didn't really meet what a lot of people thought was expectations. And I think a lot of people have, particularly towards the end of the season, have realized that the grass isn't always greener with new broadcast partners, and they may have got some positives out of this, but I think there's been probably more negatives than positives in terms of this broadcast deal that started this year. But the only way is up, I guess, is what you can say.
I give it a pass because clearly Channel 10 and Paramount Plus are backing it. They've got skin in the game, but by their own admission, and Danny Townsend, I think, is quoted as saying this as well, or something to this effect. But I mean, clearly they built the plane while it was already in the air, and that really shows, like, stuff getting like added in like 3/4 of the way through the season that needed to be there before the start of the season, and like features that are missing that aren't built yet. Keep up, like we haven't even touched on that, but like
that's next. Is
that next? Good, yeah, yep. Good. But like the building blocks are all starting to be there, and we need this ecosystem to be built around the game, and it, like, much like the fixtures, the where and the when, it needs to be relatively stable too. I think, like, if consumers and football fans are gonna like rally around the game, when they're not going to games, we need that. We need stability there too. Like, Foxtel was good for that in its heyday, and I know people like to trash it, but it really was. It had reliable shows and things that people knew when they were on, knew what they were, and kept coming back to them. So I like what they've done, and with the people they've brought in. Georgievski's good. The commentators, I think, really understated. I've liked Robbie Thompson. Yeah, love it. And they've gotten rid of some spuds as well. So overall, I'm happy with all of that, and so I give it a pass for now. But I want to see it sort of get a bit slicker next season. Like, give us a fucking rewind button. Come on.
Well, if similarly to how we're talking about crowd numbers before, the viewing numbers for obviously we don't have the public viewing numbers for what people see on Paramount Plus, where you expect the vast majority of A-League viewing comes from, but we have the public figures for all the free-to-air games, and the highest viewed game this season was the Sydney Derby, which I think was round 1 free to air, which is 146,000 people watched, which
in of itself is not good, is it?
Which is not a good number in itself.
I don't know. Well, like with that Damo though, like, and you'd probably have a bit more of a view, but like, isn't TV like it's getting really hard, like where we are in streaming and like with the viewership of everything, not only sport but TV and stuff, with it being so fragmented. Like, there's no longer appointment television where everyone's watching on the same channel, and you can therefore compare apples with apples in terms of measuring, like, who's watching what year on year. Like, I think it's a lot harder and things look a lot different. So if you're comparing P Plus to like peak Foxtel, where Foxtel was the only place to watch it and the only time to watch it, like, it's just, I think it's a bit of a flawed metric.
I think the fairest comparison would be the couple of seasons where there was a free-to-air game on Friday night on SBS, and the remainder, and those seasons, I was having a look earlier, those seasons, that Friday night game was getting approximately 180 to 200,000 people watching each week. So, and that was any given game, right? Not a round 1 Sydney Derby. But you're right. There's no real context to these numbers unless you know all of the Paramount Plus numbers as well, which aren't publicly released. We'll never know what they are. But for context, if you're looking at if you're comparing just public numbers that you can get available, the A-League this year averaged lower viewers per game than pretty much every sports league in Australia that's on free-to-air television, and that includes AFLW, that includes Women's Big Bash, that includes, these aren't big ticket viewing sports, although they can be entertaining, just like the A-League. It's just no one's watching the A-League, unfortunately. And that coming back to that argument you said, Colby, about reliability, I would sit down to watch a game on Channel 10, and I don't know whether it's on 10 bold, 10 peach, 10 apples. I don't know what it's called.
10 bananas.
I think that's right, Damo. Like that the same issues that really contributed to really especially low crowds also will have the same impact on viewership as well. And the other piece to mention is, like, even when you're trying to compare to that couple of years ago that you mentioned, the way that people consume football. I don't know about other sports actually, but that's really changed in the past couple of years. I think, I would say, because certainly we do, like, I know we consume a lot more football content via mini matches now than we would watching live when it's on, or a full replay. So I think you got to factor those in as well. And that just further fragments like these headline viewing numbers that I think you get. So I just find it really hard to read into that kind of stuff. But yeah, like you said, the absolute numbers are a damning indictment, especially compared to like basketball and Women's Big Bash and stuff. Like, you can't really say too much there.
Do you watch the mini matches or the mega minis or the mini megas, or which ones is your go-to?
Mega highlights, extended highlights, mega mini highlights.
Depends on my mood, depends on what I've got on. Like, like with the Premier League, as we know, we joke, but we've got like every single length of like mini match you can. Like, sometimes if I've got a really busy weekend, I might just watch the goals. I might watch a couple of extended highlights, couple of highlights.
What's the difference between a mega mini and a mini mega?
I'm glad you asked. No, I don't know. No idea.
I don't think there is a mini mega.
Damn,
why not?
Out there.
Next season. That's the change I want to see next season, Tommie.
I want a mini mega match.
I want a mini mega.
if there's one thing I can add about Paramount Plus and Channel 10 ratings before we move on, I think the use of ads and how ads were specific only to the Channel 10 coverage also meant that anyone who had a Paramount Plus app subscription, but was sort of thinking, oh, it's just easier to watch when it's on terrestrial TV, would have gone, nah, fuck that. There's ads on that shit. I'm watching on Paramount Plus, even though it's less convenient.
I do
I'm
that.
still going to watch it on.
Yeah.
That's what I
do
did.
too.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Because I don't want to see ads. Like I don't want that interrupting the flow of the game. So
And if you're paying for the broadcast that doesn't include the ads, then why would you watch the one that does include it?
Exactly. But all right, let's move on though. So the next thing, as Colby rightly pointed out, was Keep Up, and Keep Up, which is probably something a lot of us have sort of purged from our consciousness, was the new A-League's website, which was rolled out a few weeks prior to the season starting. It promised to be everything to everyone, but basically it was a replacement for the SBS's now defunct the World Game website, which ironically, I think midway through this season, they ended up basically hitting the big delete button on. Boys, have you used Keep Up since about week 2 of the A-League? I think I know the answer to that, so I'll let you answer it and then follow up with a part B to that question.
Well,
Tommie,
yes, only when you send me links.
I like. I'll say my silver lining about Keep Up first, Tommie, because I think we've got a lot more like bad points to say about it than good points. One redeeming feature that I thought was good about it was I actually thought, particularly towards the end of the season, which is a bit of a theme here across everything this with this season of the A-League. But with Keep Up, towards the end of the season, the content on there, like the blog posts or articles or whatever, the write-ups, they were interesting. I was clicking on a few of them and reading them. So they were good. Well, when they worked, because they often didn't work when I was like trying to click through on through Twitter or Reddit or particular channels, they didn't really work. The only other time I was using the website is I've actually got bookmarked in a browser the Keep Up fixture. And I found that it was going to the appropriate week. My bookmark was just automatically directing me to the appropriate week. And that was how I was trying to
keep up with fixtures.
Yeah.
I was trying to keep up, but it was a challenge.
Damo?
Yeah, look, I can say I probably went on there half a dozen times without being sent a link or an article that I clicked on. And articles that I have read that people have sent me, the great content, great written content. There's some really good stuff on there. But I myself never went, oh, I'm going to go on the Keep Up app and scroll through what's written and find out if I want to read one. Not the same way that I would go on, any other sort of news app or any, The Athletic, for example, or all the stuff that you're going to want to read about football, the good articles, right? They're going to get sent to you, or they're going to be posted on Twitter or on Facebook, and so that's sort of how I used Keep Up this season. Although, Tommie, you did tell me about some sort of little free kick game, and I spent 15 minutes looking for it and gave up.
Couldn't find it. So
I wanted to play
it. For those who have no idea what we're talking about, about 2 weeks ago, I went onto the Keep Up app, so the phone version, just to see if there was anything new on there that I hadn't noticed in the past sort of 3 or 4 months since I'd last been on there. And I noticed that there was, in the game section, there used to be just like a pairs game, and that was a bit meh. In fact, it was very meh. But then I noticed that there was like this new free kick game, and I mean that kept me occupied for at least 15 minutes. So I thought that was really fun. But it seems like it's only on phone. I'm guessing you went on the internet on like a desktop. Damo?
And then I did, and then I also went through the browser on my phone because I thought maybe it's only a mobile game. And then I went, you know what? I'm not dedicated enough to download the app to try and play this game.
What? You don't have the app? Come on, mate. Like, even if you don't use it, what are you? Like,
I don't have the app.
Mate, I was running at 98% capacity of memory on my phone. I was getting rid of keep up first.
But Tommie, like back to your original point, and I think my comment before about Danny Townsend, I think he was referring to keep up, but my comment still stands in relation to P plus. Like they built that shit, when it was in the air too. But keep up, definitely, they were building it on the way. It needs, like, again, much like fixtures, much like everything else, it needs the ecosystem around it to be solid, in order for it to be a destination. And I can see you've got fantasy NFTs, bullet points here. Like, I think that's one thing. Well, maybe not NFTs. I don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't even really know what that is.
Damo will talk at length about that.
But fantasy, and we've talked about this before. This is a big thing for Jesse, but like it's true. Like, I think if we could get a proper fantasy league going and it lived on the Keep Up website, people would go there to do their fantasy team, and well, they might click around on an article while they're there because they might be looking to find out about a particular player. They go in, they watch a couple of press conferences, they see a few ads. Like, this
100% would get me
in.
Critical. I would spend hours on the Keep Up app if there was a fantasy league. Because I'd go in there and then I'd go, oh, who should I take out? Who should I put in? I'll read the power ranking article that's written, that's right there, popped up in my feed.
Is this what you did? Is this what you did with the Premier League MTAG FPL Damo?
Yeah, look, can't say I did. Although I didn't finish last, so I got that in my wheelhouse.
There's 2 points I want to make. First of all, I'm totally on board with Jesse's point about how I think there is a massive sort of undercurrent that you can generate, an interest in the A-League that you can generate just by having a fantasy competition. This season I actually played, I think it's Super Coach's version of A-League Fantasy, and not the greatest of apps and a bit clunky, and it was complicated. It wasn't like the Premier League sort of in-house fantasy game where it's really simple, the scoring is really simple, and so I sort of thought, oh geez, if the A-League just does like the simple version of this and it's fun and accessible and people will get around it. Like there's 2,000 people that are playing A-League Fantasy on that app that I was talking about before, and I mean straight up there's another 2,000 people I think probably that straight away would jump on board, probably try to recruit their mates, and straight away there's more eyeballs regularly accessing the Keep Up website.
The second thing,
when I first really started getting nose deep in the A-League was when Fox Sports had the fantasy A-League competition, and they ran it to perfection in my mind. It was so simple. There was no concept of, it was, you had 100 points and players had a value that was, 4 for one player. It was very similar to the in-house Premier League one. Scoring was super simple, and I knew every player on every team. It's just, and that's how I really that was how I first really got deep into the A-League, was through Fantasy A-League on Fox Sports website. And they obviously canned that as interest and viewership, and their sort of contract was running out and they didn't want to have another product to manage. So, but if like you said, Tommie, if Keep Up can do that, and if the APL can do that on Keep Up, rather, it takes everything to another level in terms of engagement on, and that's what everything's about these days, is engagement, clicks, how many views you get on things. And fantasy, I think, is one of their keys to doing that. But I think they just have to do it right, which is why they didn't do it this season, just gone.
Well, that's a very good point about doing it right. And initially it did seem as though it was too soon for them to launch a fantasy competition. I mean, as we said, they were sort of building this thing in the air, the Keep Up website. But I think if they had have rolled out a fantasy competition that sort of like it broke sort of second week or first week or something like that, it might have done more harm than good. So maybe in hindsight, they did the right thing by holding it off. But I guess the concerning thing, I think, for fans was that instead of sort of saying, look, it wasn't ready, we didn't want to roll out a half-assed effort sort of with a week to go, that it was going to break and was going to make us look bad, Danny Townsend then rolled out this line that they were going to sort of roll out this brand new sort of brand new functionality or way of looking at a fantasy competition using NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and there was going to be sort of a packet style. And I remember just listening to this, and I mean, I'm a bit of an NFT skeptic about sort of the usefulness of them. And Daniel, I'm sure you have your chance in a second to say how good they are. But to me, it was a case of, guys, you're overcomplicating this. Like, fantasy at its heart is a simple game that just drags people in because you have to just watch a lot of the game or digest a lot of the stats to be good at it, right? And it just seemed like they were totally missing the point by overcomplicating this thing by dragging in NFT and monkey pictures and stuff like that. And I thought, what are you doing? Like, just make this simple and easy, and people will have fun. Yeah, it was just. I'm not sure what path they're going to head down with next season, but I guess it's one of those things where you're sort of cautiously optimistic, but also concerned about how they could fuck it up.
I just want milk that tastes like real milk, Tommie.
Damo, tell us about packet fantasy and NFTs and how that could be good, because I'm struggling to see how it could
convince me.
Well, I don't, to be honest, I don't know how NFTs, the whole Web3 universe would go through fantasy football, but this whole packet system, right? There is a fantasy league that is run. It's an app that it's launched at the Premier League a couple of years ago. And I actually really like the way that it functions. It essentially is a 5-a-side team. You get given X amount of packs each week. You can't spend real money on it. But as a subscriber to marketing emails, you get a bonus pack and these kind of things, right? So, and from the 5 packs you get each week, you pick a 5-a-side team with a couple of players on the bench, and then it starts all again next week. So it's half a game of chance of who's in your 5 packs over that weekend, and then it's half a game of, can I pick the right people on the right weekends from the right packs that I got? And that, I thought, was that I've found that that's a sort of refreshing way to do it. And they have weekly prizes and weekly sort of competitions, as well as a season-long one that, if you're really invested. But if you do it this way, right, you can have people that can just drop in every week, once a month. They play once a month, and they can still compete to be on the leaderboard for the weekend. And I think that was the intention, sort of, that Danny Townsend was leaning towards, where he said we're having this refreshing look at ways of packs and engaging fans any way they can, and making sure that it's a competitive platform in a game-like function week by week, where if you miss a week, you're not doomed and you give up and you never look at it again.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I just hope they have something next year, to be honest. I don't know if it's going to be any good, but I think they're going to roll something out, and hopefully it'll be fun. So, look, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago during the Premier League season review about the idea of us definitely doing an A-League fantasy comp next season, and it's pretty much solidified in my mind that we'll run a fantasy competition next year. Don't know what website it's going to be on, but we will do.
Let's go.
So that's that'll be fun. That'll be exciting, and it might mean that I maybe take somewhat of a step back from Premier League fantasy, just because.
Yeah, I think I might too take a step back from Premier League fantasy and focus my energy into the A-League one.
But could you take more of a step back from Premier League fantasy?
Yeah, I could have not picked my team 2 weeks before the season started.
in our 12-person draft league, the person who auto drafted ended up finishing second.
Well, that says all you need to know.
I know, right? All right, let's keep moving though. One final thing that I wanted to touch upon was squad composition. And this year saw a return to a more balanced split between established and young players in the A-League after the 2 previous COVID-ravaged seasons. Central Coast and Adelaide, and to a lesser degree, I guess, the Knicks as well, continued their strategy of investing in young players, with Jacob Farrell, Cassini Yengi, Moture, and Yaya Zakuli all major beneficiaries of this investment strategy. There was a few misses as far as the marquees went, though, with City's Endo and Pucciarelli failing to make any impact. Granted, they weren't marquees, they were just visa players, but broader point there. But obviously the biggest missed opportunity was Daniel Sturridge's 6-month holiday in Australia, where he both failed to make much of an impact on or off the pitch. Boys, do you think it's a good thing that League is sort of splitting out into youth developers such as Adelaide and Central Coast, or those that are more likely to be working on building a championship-winning squad such as Victory or Sydney?
Well, I think there's some clubs that have sort of realized what their place in a world football landscape is. Clubs like Central Coast, they realize they're not going to be competing every year for a title in the A-League. They just don't have the finances. They don't have the opportunity to bring the right players in. But if they put all their time and energy into creating players and selling players, that's how they're going to function as a club, and that's how they're going to be a successful business as well. But I think you can go either way, but it's enjoyable if your club is not competing for trophies, it's enjoyable to see them developing talent. So you can do two things, right? You can be competing, and then in your rebuild phase, which is inevitable in a salary capped league,
unless you're Sydney,
why don't you use those 4 years of your rebuild as an opportunity to push through young players and sell young players, and that way you can bring better players in to lean you towards pushing towards titles again. But I think league-wide, and I can't remember where this is from. I think it was the Football Observatory is the company that does it. They did a study of all the leagues across the world and which league had all the leagues had the most minutes played by players under the age of 23. And I think the A-League came in third place. On if you average out most minutes per 90 of players under the age of 23, the A-League was in third place. So that's a pretty incredible thing that the league as a whole is developing youth players. And I think we said that in the preview, that we're all really excited to watch young players and youth team players and A-League academies producing players, and they clearly are now.
Boys, I flicked into the I didn't watch the whole game, but I watched some of the Olyroos last night, and I was pleasantly surprised that I pretty much knew all of the players that were playing. There was one guy who was from Fulham, who I didn't really know much about him, Tyree someone. I can't remember his name, but almost all of the others were all from the A-League, and they were reasonably established players. And I thought, hey, this is great, right? Like this is a good thing that the A-League has sort of starting players amongst the Olyroos. So I thought that was good, and I guess like that's like you say, I'm one of those people that enjoys watching sort of like the next generation coming through the A-League, sort of from their first appearances through to sort of maybe making a move overseas or something like that. So the challenge, I guess, for A-League clubs is trying to combine what Melbourne City have done over the last 2 years, where they've been both successful on the pitch, but they've also brought through the likes of sort of Nathan Atkinson, Arzani, Connor Metcalf, and they've gone on to bigger and better things overseas. So that's obviously that's the gold-plated standard, right? And obviously they rely heavily on marquees and great scouting network and stuff like that as well. But I guess Newcastle this year have also shown that they can find great visa players as well. So interesting times ahead, I guess, as far as the A-League is concerned, and that's probably one of the genuine positives to come out of the A-League this year is the young players that have come through.
Boys, question without notice: who do you think, in your opinion, were the best clubs in terms of their visa signings, like best and worst? I'll go first. Best, Newcastle. Worst, Brisbane Roar.
Yeah, that's hard to argue with Brisbane being the worst. And I think Colby...
I reckon Perth gives them a run for their money, though.
Yeah, that's a good shout. But they have Fornaroli is considered a visa player. Is he now an Australian player?
I think he's
know.
Probably now considered an Australian player, but
Aussie Bruno.
Even still, he's been here for 5 years, right?
Well, he's had how long has he
like
had,
a new find or anything?
He's had his citizenship since like 2018 or something. So I don't know if he's been considered an Australian player for the last 3 years.
Yeah, well, I think he only just got his citizenship, didn't he? This season. I think that's how he became eligible.
I think the Woo and Central Coast also did a good job with their visa players.
The Woo, yes,
agree with that. Yep. I still don't understand how the visa rules apply to Wellington, to be honest. I don't feel like I can give an answer about whether theirs was good or not
Yeah.
because I don't know who counts.
Yeah.
New Zealand
Um,
New Zealand players count as Australian players essentially
Locals.
for,
Yeah.
and so do Australians. So Wellington have got the pick of New Zealand and Australia as locals, and then they can have visa players who are from places that aren't Australia and New Zealand.
Yeah, okay. Boys, I'll throw it out as an extension of that question. What do you think of Adelaide's visa signings? Good, bad, indifferent?
Who
Well-
were they?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I was thinking. I was like,
One
who
one
are they?
one day Ramos.
Yeah, true. Isaias, who I think is still
but
Australian.
Isaias
or-
is an Australian
he's still-
citizen
still
now,
visa.
so he's
Mm.
I think he's Australian under the rules. But yeah, they've got
Jakobsen as well.
one day Ramos, Jakobsen, and who's the fullback? Oh, the other Spanish guy.
Harvey Norman Lopez.
Yeah, Harvey Norman Lopez.
I'd say that's a fail. I'd put that into the fail bucket, like or the bad bucket rather than the good bucket.
Consistent
Yeah,
bucket.
I think they're the epitome of the middle of the range bucket.
Yeah.
Mm.
They're not the intention for visa spots. Let's just say
No.
that.
Exactly. Boys, all right. One final thing before we move on to check the tapes. What's your bold call for the off season?
Yeah, look, I'm standing away from making bold calls after what we'll probably hear in the next segment.
Oh lordy, yep. Mate, you have made a few years worth of bold calls just in
Yeah.
one call. I think
I've made a
So,
mockery of myself, I think.
Colby.
I think there's going to be a massive APL/FA announcement in the off season. It's going to be huge. It could be something regarding the national second division or the domestic transfer system, or it could just be another rebrand. But either way, the hype is going to be exactly the same. And we're not going to know until it's announced.
I'm kind of I'm taking some of the low hanging fruit, I think, with mine, but it's going to be very interesting to see what plays out with the whole Ninkovic saga. I mean, we're halfway through it right now. Lots of people sort of just leaning into the meme, leaning into the situation by saying he's going to sign for Western Sydney and basically just trash his whole relationship with Sydney, which would be both hilarious and horrible. But still, I wouldn't be surprised even if he does end up going to like MacArthur, for example. I know he was close to going there, 2 years ago. So, and it would be very MacArthur areas to sign him now that he's 2-3 years older and physically nowhere near the player that he used to be.
Boys, how have Sydney had one bad season and have turned into a meme club? Like,
It's great.
defies
Not even,
logic.
not even that bad of a season. They were pretty close to making finals.
It was a pretty look by their standards. It was a pretty bad season. Like, I don't think there's any arguing. I mean, I was like trying to argue it halfway through the season, but even I will put my hand up now and say this is a very bad season for Sydney FC. But like most other clubs, like the Victory. Oh, it was funny because they finished last, and we all sunk the boot into them. But like we were all like, they weren't doing anything ridiculous or like really meme worthy. We were just laughing at them because they were shit for a season and their fans were crying. But like, Sydney have legit turned into a meme club. Like it would be like Brisbane, like, tailing off and having Thomas Broich go and sign for the Victory or something. Like it's just outrageous that they could let it get to this.
I'm sure you will cover that in much more detail coming up in your season review of Sydney's season coming up shortly, Colby. Look, before we get on to check the tapes, though, a couple of listener questions. First of all, and this is not really a question, it's just a statement from Shannon. He says, dedicate your whole show to football overlord Lachie Wales. That I don't think anyone saw coming was Lachie Wales turning into a grand final winner at any club, even Melbourne City. And the second listener question that we've got, and this is more of a question, which is this could quite easily get thrown into my season review of Melbourne City, but Mace Caruana, he asks, granted City have a global network, but why doesn't Kisnorbo get the plaudits that Popper and now Aloisi receives? 2 grand final appearances, 1 championship, 2 premierships, players receiving individual and team accolades. Sure, he deserves more credit than he has received. What do you think, boys?
Well, I think you can throw, was it 2 W League championships in there as well as a manager. So
Very good shout. Very good shout.
he's done everything pretty much as a manager in the domestic game in the A-League. So I think did he win manager of the season last year as well? Or no, that was Stadge. But you know, he's definitely come close. I don't know. I think it's more of the narrative that surrounds Popovic and Aloisi, that their club was horrible or wasn't great, or Aloisi's previous runs as a coach weren't great. And you know, he managed to turn it around and become a champion coach. And Popovic took a team from last to almost making a grand final. I think just the narrative that surrounds those two coaches builds up and sells headlines, whereas Kisnorbo took over the job and City were already a good side, and he's just continued on them being a great side. And so he never did any sort of real transformation or any real change management. He just continued on what was a really good team, which in itself is a very difficult task, but it's not given the same credit as someone that picks up a team from last and takes them to first.
Yeah, Damo, I think that's right. And I think it's a great point by Mason, a great question. If I wanted to take the sympathetic view, I would say, yeah, like obviously look what he's done, and I think he definitely gets overlooked. And I think that maybe he has a less sexy national team career than Popper or Aloisi, and he's not probably as much of a media darling as those players. Still had a great player career. But maybe that national team glow and media connection just isn't there. That's if I take the sympathetic view. If I play devil's advocate, I probably say, well, like what you were getting onto, Damo, yeah, he's got the entire backing of like an entire nation in the City Football Group, and he's simply just, you know, come on board with the women's and the men's team and just, you know, like basically sharpened them up and had them winning. But like not all managers could do that. Like they've been in the City Group for a while, and there's been many managers that have failed. So I think you really got to. I think he really does deserve more credit than he gets.
I think the test for Kisnorbo is, and it's a bit like Popper. Sort of, he started out at Western Sydney, and they went on those amazing runs that he had there. But the test for Kisnorbo, I guess, it really getting some respect is going to be when he goes to another club, inevitably, whether it's overseas or down the track in the A League, and someone says, "All right, turn this good club into a great club, or turn this this average side into a good one." And it'd be very interesting to see if he can do that. I mean, even Kevin Muscat's shown sort of that.
I was going to say,
he's done a pretty decent,
isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. He's done a pretty good job over in Japan, obviously following in Ange's footsteps over there. But it shows that still it's hard in anywhere you go. There's no easy coaching jobs, even if the team is sort of set up to win. As some people might say that Montbert had left that team to win, but you still got to guide them through 27 games plus finals to get either a Premier's Plate or a championship. So, no, well said, Colby. But look, I think it is time to check the tapes, and we've got a couple of crackers lined up for everyone this time around. So we're going to start with actually some quite good analysis from Jesse, and then I'll jump in at the end. So here's the first segment.
It'll be Milicic, which leads to my bold prediction that the MacArthur Bulls may start okay briefly, but I think they're going to tank and self-cannibalize and potentially become vegan. And I think that what will happen is that the patients will be like they'll get second season syndrome over at the Bulls, but they won't have a vaccine for it. So that's my prediction there. So I think that a lot of people will be focused on other clubs naturally because they might have had similar expectations. But I think MacArthur look a little more volatile to me at the moment. So my pick is that if things don't go well there, we might see a quick manager sacking.
Wow.
Yeah, I think they're going to blow up. I think they're gonna go second. I think they're gonna go big this season. Oh shit! Well, there you have it. Just telling on myself there a little bit because I tell you what, the Bulls they were pretty average this season, and Jesse called it. Ante Milicic wasn't the first manager sacked, but yeah, definitely not a great call that the Bulls were going to go second. Wow,
What a surprising own goal! I
think,
was waiting for Jesse to say something crazy, and I was just nodding along, being like, "Yeah, he's nailed it."
Except that for Ante getting sacked, because I mean, he was the only manager this season to basically resign. Though, no, there was a couple of sackings, but
that's not re-sign though. That's resign. Just check.
I think the main takeaway from that clip there, Tommie, was, and for the audio listeners who can't see the video vision, Colby and I had on exactly the same tops in that clip as we've got on tonight.
Yeah, that was.
I also enjoyed the video feed where there was 7 screens on the screen as well. That was.
I just popped out of nowhere. I was like, "Where am I?" And then my screen popped up from the preview. Anyway, onto my egregious claim.
You'll have to wait. Next up is Colby with who he's worried about, or who he was worried about this season.
A couple to watch. I mentioned Angus Thurgate. He's still just 21. Last year, we were all saying it should have been his year. He should have broke out, and he sort of didn't go onto the boil like we're expecting. So, hoping for a big season for him this year, or else he's going to be the new who are we talking about?
Thurgate.
Andrew. Sorry.
No. The name will come to me, but the new player who doesn't fulfill their potential in the A-League. Archie Goodwin,
Bruce
though,
Kamau.
just 7. Bruce Kamau. He's going to be the new Bruce Kamau, Thurgate, if he keeps having mediocre seasons after all the promise he's shown.
So, put some respect on Bruce Kamau's name.
Where's the own goal?
Bruce Kamau's had a brilliant season last year.
No, the bad take was that Angus Thurgate was gonna have a bad season, or could have a bad season. He ended up having a great season. I think he was their player of the year. I think at the Jets.
He was. Tommie, I think I can defend this take. What I was getting at there was my point was that if he had a bad season, then he would be the new Bruce Kamau who fails to fill his potential. But I agree. I think he had a great season. And so therefore, at the fork in the road, Bruce Kamau's just gone off in this direction, and Thurgate has just gone from strength to strength.
And I mean, the irony is that Thurgate actually had a good season, and yet the Jets still finished out of finals. So
yeah, rip.
Next up is me with another pretty. This take was just everywhere. It was all over the shop. And then is that Lecky, J-Mac and Naboo will start for the Socceroos together in Melbourne against either Japan or Vietnam in 2022.
How is that possible if Graham Arnold refuses to play Macca?
Arnie out. Oh, there you have it. So not only with that one did we get an average take, one that didn't end up eventuating, but we also got the reason why it didn't eventuate as well. So
good take. I've had 2 good takes now, Tommie. You're making me look good. I don't know how you're doing this.
Well, look, I've set you up for a fail.
Oh no,
because you're up next. And here's Colby with his Brisbane prediction.
Oh no. Or, of course, is making finals, but they'll be looking not to get knocked out early, and they'll be looking to make an impact and play some more entertaining football again this season. Again, I'm predicting them to finish 4th, but I think they're going to go through to the semis this season, and they're going to have a little bit more of an impact. So,
Colby, can we just talk more about Brisbane Roar's impact in the finals this year?
I think my reaction in that video was that little "I'm surprised" meme.
Oh yeah,
I can't defend that one. There's no defending that.
But look, here is a call with that is indefensible in its outrageousness and its scale, and one that, like you said, Damo, where there was sort of the waving arms, trying to gain your balance. This is everyone, even when it was said. So
people going.
Oh, I know this one already.
ladies and gents, brace yourselves for one bad take. But I feel like
this
at
is
least
why we made this section, right? So
yeah.
we keep me accountable for the stupid things I say on this podcast.
Wait for it.
Echo Tommie with City doing the double again this year. I am calling for Wanderers to win the FFA Cup. I think they'll win the cup. And then my wooden spoon shout is Wellington. Sorry, Jesse, that's my shout for the wooden spoon. But Golden Boot, J-Mac. But this is my bold call and Johnny Warren medalist all in the one is Dimi Petratos, and he'll almost book his spot on the plane to Qatar 2022.
Oh my goodness.
So run the tapes back on that in about 9 months' time and tell me how stupid I am.
Oh Lord. So Colby, help me out. How stupid exactly is Damo?
Well, that was a bold prediction.
Hey, that's why we have that segment. I rolled the dice, baby.
One of these years they're going to come off. One of these years, it's like a clock just being right, a broken clock being right. Twice a day. So yep. One of these days, Damo. One of these days.
Oh wow, yeah. That was an absolute doozy, and we all knew it was coming, right? I mean, that was the boldest of all bold calls, even in the season preview pod that we felt at the time. And like you said, like who knows, it could have come off. It didn't, but yeah. All right, just need to compose myself now after that because man, it still throws me every time. But look, all right, next up, so we're going to do our team-by-team season reviews. So we'll be discussing every team, this season's finish versus last year's finish, whether it's a pass or fail from the squad and or manager, what you loved and or hated about them this season, and a highlight and or low light of their season. So we will do this in reverse order this time around. So it's basically reverse alphabetical order this time around. So it means that we'll be starting with moi, and it means that I will be starting to talk about the champions, the Woo. So the Woo, they finished third in the regular season, but they end up obviously winning the grand final in the last couple of weeks, which was fantastic for them. But a huge improvement from 10th to 3rd. And it was pretty much down to the final 2 weeks where they were in with a decent shout of actually winning the Premier's Plate as well, and basically kind of shat the bed a little bit, but still a 3rd place finish was still very credible. A massive pass or an A+ I'm going to give them for their the return, I guess, for the squad and all the manager. John Aloisi did a great job, I think, with that squad, and obviously they were missing Diamante as well, who everyone, including me in the season preview pod, said that Diamante was basically the key to their season. I loved that Diamante's injury didn't railroad their season. It seemed to, in fact, actually sort of bring them better closer together. It seemed as though they had sort of some new purpose, and it also made them, I think, a little bit better even in attack, a little bit sort of less one-dimensional. They were very defensively solid with Ben Garuccio, aka Scorpion King 2, Leo Lacroix, Topo Stanley, and Tomoki Imai, and also Josh Risdon as well, all doing a great job with lots of 1-0 wins early on. But then they found their shooting boots sort of once Prijovic settled in midway through the season. Undeniably, the highlight of their season was the comprehensive win over favourites Melbourne City in the grand final. But I tell you what, not far behind would have been the massive comeback in the semi-final against the VUC, which will live long into the young memories of the Woo faithful. And I tell you what, also a global viral goal from Ben Garuccio was pretty fun too. The low light continues to be for the Woo, the much criticised homelessness, where they played across, I think it was 5 grounds this season. It did seem like a long time ago where we were talking about them playing out of Lakeside Stadium as well. I'm not sure if anyone remembers that, and the dust up between them and South Melbourne, the clash over over Lakeside Stadium. But look, that continues to be, I guess, an issue for the club, even if they have broken ground on that new stadium there. So, look, overwhelmingly positive season for the Woo, and pretty much the only way they could have improved on that would have been if they had been playing games out of their own stadium. Next up, though, is going to be slightly less positive season, and that's Western Sydney Wanderers with Damo.
Yeah, so Wanderers, I mean, they've had another horrible season. I think this is 5 years in a row they've missed out on finals. This was supposed to be the year that I said in my preview as well that they've assembled a good squad. Carl Robinson has been able to have a full preseason. The RBB were going to be back in the stands. This was the year to sort of start to rebuild what we think of the Wanderers, which is that team that just came in and took over. And it just didn't happen. They actually, they finished 8th last year and they went 2 worse this year and finished 10th. So I guess if you're going to say if it's a pass or fail, it's a fail from both the squad and then the manager, who obviously lost his job under some pretty horrible circumstances. Again, the fans, the team, the media, everyone got on his back. So yeah, and I think I said in the preview that if the season started poorly, the heat was really going to be on Robinson, and he needed to start the season with a bang, and they started horribly, and it went as expected. Robinson fell off, and I think I remember saying in the preview that if Robinson goes, then the Wanderers could be in for an absolute horror show of a season, and that's sort of what it turned out to be. So I guess next year it'll be previewing again, have the Wanderers put together enough to make it back to the finals. And it feels weird to be saying that Wanderers, who we consider as probably one of the biggest clubs in the country in terms of its supporter base, at least, and its sort of infamy, haven't been in the finals for 5 years. And I think they've only been in the finals like 2 or 3 in their whole history.
Damo, sorry, just to interject with a quick question. We were talking on the group chat before this pod, like there's some breaking off-season news still happening with transfers, and we were talking about how Kusini Yengi, I believe, has now been announced at the Wanderers, despite Adelaide's best efforts to keep him. My question is, after the record you've just said about the Wanderers missing out on finals, how is it that they're still a destination club and they can attract all of these names despite other A-League clubs fighting tooth and nail? More successful, I might say, in recent history, A-League clubs to keep them, yet the Wanderers can still pull players or steal players from their rivals.
I just think there's this sort of this aura or this kind of I can't think of the word that I'm looking for, this sort of bias. And when people think of the Wanderers, they think of that season they won the Champions League and the season where they were selling out stadiums and the ground was the sporting ticket in Australia, was to see the RBB in action at Parramatta. And I think when people think of the Wanderers, that's what they think. I'm going to go to a big club with great fans and I get to live in Sydney. And I think that's a selling point for a lot of players. So, yeah, but to be honest, it doesn't sell it for me. I don't know how it sells it for players all around the country, but it clearly does. They're doing something right.
To be honest, though, I think Kusini Yengi, like with the swagger, like I think he's actually a pretty good fit for that club. This might be a check the tapes for next season, but I think he's actually a pretty good fit.
Yeah, I guess we'll probably talk about that in the preview more. If I go back to what I loved and sort of hated about this season for the Wanderers, I think if you're a Wanderers fan, you would have absolutely hated. I think they had 6 wins the whole season, which is grim. And so grim. All 6 of those wins they couldn't back up with a result in the following game. So they had 6 wins, all followed by a loss in their next game. You just can't build any momentum. That's what you've got to absolutely hate as a fan, is they didn't even put together 2 results in a row all season, which is how miserable must that have been to be a Wanderers fan. I mean, there's very little you could have loved about the season. I did enjoy Adama Traore being back in the A-League. He had a good season. He went to the A-League All-Stars. It's good to see him back in Australia, and that's probably the only thing you can pick out of the Wanderers season is something that you might say that you loved, is seeing him playing in Australia again. Highlight of the season. It's really hard to pick any highlights. There really wasn't any. I think there was a win over Melbourne Victory early on in the season, which and Sydney FC as well. That's probably their highlights. They had 2 wins over 2 big clubs, which, you know, if that's what you're picking out as a highlight of your season, you know, you haven't really done much, have you? And the low light is probably just the season itself, you know, finishing 10th with all the promise of going back to the finals and having a great season. And I thought they were going to. I predicted them to finish 4th, and I was well off there. So, yeah, another miserable season for the Wanderers. And
Damo,
so long may it continue.
Damo, I've got to throw it out there that the highlight for me, at least, of the Wanderers season was Daniel Margush's effort, because that was, we talk about peak A-League a lot, but Daniel Margush managing to just fuck it up so hard was like that's up there in terms of peak A-League for just bad goalkeeping. So love that.
Wasn't great.
All right. Thanks, Damo. Sorry, I think you finished, aren't you?
Yep, all done.
All right. So thanks, Damo. Next up, you're up again with Wellington.
Yep. I'll talk about the Phoenix season, and I don't think there was many of us. I think Jesse might have been the only one of us that predicted that the Knicks would make the finals this year. And we heard in the Check the Tape section earlier, I predicted Wellington to finish last. So they proved me wrong there. And I think that credit goes to Ufuk Talay, who gets another huge pass in terms of, his season. He keeps managing to play good football with lots of turnover in players, and he still manages to play good football and get good results. So another good season from him. And just some of the players that they've been able to put together. Some of the players have been able to put sort of partnerships together. We saw Piscopo having a great season. Surprisingly, their home record, which we were talking about before, isn't really a home, but they were very hard to beat in that quote unquote home games all year, which is great considering they weren't even in New Zealand. So that's a huge takeaway from their season. But I think the biggest thing for the Knicks is just building that consistency. You know, they went on I think it was a 7 or an 8 game unbeaten streak to start the year, which was incredible. But apart from that, it was just like win one week, lose the next, win one week, lose the next. It was, I think I had it written down here, during their last 17 games of the season, they didn't win one or win or lose more than 2 matches in a row. So if they won 2 in a row, they lost the next one. If they lost 2 in a row, they won the next one. So you never knew what to expect from the Knicks, and that consistency they really need to sort of build if they're going to go to the next level. Highlight of the season, I think making the finals and the sort of emergence of Ollie Sale, who had a wonderful season. So I reckon that's probably their main highlight is in seeing players like that. He had some incredible stats this year. There was one game in particular, which I've got some stats here. They had 36 shots that Wellington faced in that one game. And in that game, he made 11 saves, 9 saves, which he had to dive for. The XG of the other team was 3.46, and he had a clean sheet and man of the match, which in recorded history of XG in the A-League is the highest XG for a goalkeeper to keep a clean sheet. So it's statistically one of the best performances from a goalkeeper in A-League history, that game. So I'd say that's probably a highlight for the season was Ollie Sale, his emergence, and that game from him, where he had arguably one of the greatest performances from a goalkeeper that we've seen in the A-League. Lowlights, I think sort of the underwhelming way that Gary Hooper went about the season. Everyone expected him to sort of be the focal point. I don't think Jesse spoke about him. They're going to have to rely on him to score a lot of their important goals. They just didn't come from him. He sort of looks like he's checked out. He obviously had lots of injuries, but He started the season pretty well, but I don't think he scored for a really, really long time towards the back end of the season. And, if you're looking at Gary Hooper and his career, you'd probably think that this is one of, if not his last season he's going to play football after that performance. So I'd say that was a low light. The guy that you thought you were going to be leaning on all year wasn't there. But overall, probably I'd give Wellington a B+ or an A- season in terms of what was expected of them and what they delivered.
Very good. A couple of things I wanted to point out. First of all, I think everyone dreams of coming home with a wet sail, and the Knicks obviously achieved that this year.
Hey, Tommie, how excited would you be? Like, first game of the Knicks, like when they get back to New Zealand, if it's raining, then they'd really be coming home with a wet sail, wouldn't they?
Yes, it'd be dream come true. Dream come true.
And if the official A-League's account doesn't tweet that, I'm rioting.
The other thing I wanted to point out was just the strange statistical anomaly of the Knicks finishing 6th, but having the second worst goal difference in the league. I don't know if anyone else noticed that, but they were 5 worse than the Raw. I think they conceded the most goals in the league, which is pretty wild considering how bad the likes of the Raw and the Glory were. But yeah. Just I didn't realize even until right now just how much that had blown out. They had a negative goal difference of minus 15 and still made the final. So very weird scenario.
I think also the fact that Ollie Sale conceded the most goals of any goalkeeper in the league, but was still considered as the highlight of Wellington's season sort of sums up how poor their defense was and that he had to be that good to give them any chance of winning games.
No wonder Louis Fenton retired. All right, next up, though, is Colby with Sydney. Take it away, Colby.
Sydney FC, this has got to be the last season that I review and preview Sydney FC because I'm absolutely sick of them. But, that's a story for another time. They finished 8th after finishing 2nd last season. This is their equal lowest ever finish. This is the first time Sydney have failed to make finals since the 15-16 A-League season. But surprisingly, given their recent dominance, this is only the 5th time, or this is the 5th time in 17 seasons of the A-League that we've had that Sydney have failed to make the finals. So, yeah, like objectively a bad season, particularly given their recent dominance in the league.
Well, did you say this only the 5th time in Sydney's history they've missed the finals and the Wanderers haven't made for the last 5 years and they've been around for half the amount of time?
That puts it into perspective, doesn't it? So they've still got, I guess you should tweet that to Sydney fans, Damo, because they've still got that. They've still got that in their back pocket.
You're struggling as a club when you're leaning on picking out stats that make your rival look like shit. Yeah.
Well, that's really like Melbourne Victory fans tweeting about the crowd numbers at Woo and City, isn't it? Like, just clutching at straws. But that's also a story for another time. Whether the squad or manager, like their sort of pass fail ratings, you'd have to give both a fail. Let's do each in turn. Squad fail, probably with the exception of Anthony Caceres and Callum Talbot. I think like you could say pretty much the whole squad just failed this season. They're relying on a 36 or 37-year-old, however old he is now, Alex Wilkinson, to play every game. I think he played just about every game in a season that saw Sydney concede 44 goals. And that's just way off the pace for a Sydney FC team. Because if you look at like when they finished 2nd last season, they conceded 23. So that's almost a double blowout in their goals conceded. They brought back a 36-year-old Babo, who was also a failure, 5 goals in 20 appearances. Adam Lafondra, 34, didn't fare much better, 7 goals in 21. Ninkovic, who's 36, passed his influential best. Grant, Redmayne, passed it. We've spoken about them. Narsing, one of the flops of the season. Donachie, not good enough for Sydney FC. Like, the list goes on and on. Manager, Corica, fail. Like, whether, every week he just looked tactically inflexible. The systems he was playing, he was putting out that 4-2-2-2 or 4-4-2, a variation thereof. Like he was playing wide or narrow every week, and that's all he did. And had one of the worst seasons in Sydney FC recent memory. Yet he gets a contract extension at the end of the season when you've got the whole the whole fan base calling for him to be sacked after he's just had a massive fail of the season. They've gone, right, this guy's the guy who we want to be doing the rebuild. Blows my mind. What you loved or hated about the season? I'm going to start with what I loved because the hated is a much longer list. I did love to see Joel King rewarded with that Ruse call-up for his form. I loved Cam Sober's revival and his early season form. Good to see him go to a home where he was performing, and that was a big surprise to everyone and a welcome one. And finally seeing some young talent come through in Callum Talbot. More on him in a moment. But I hated the fan hysteria at a bad season. I was trying to calm everyone down halfway through the season, going, Sydney fans, you're losing it over nothing. They're going to be fine. They weren't fine, but my comment still stands. Like it's one bad season, guys. Come on. Like you've got a long way to go before you're down with the Roar at 11th and just not looking to ever really make a splash in the league. And like you were a club that was winning championships and the club just doesn't look like it ever has the ambition to do it again. But more on that later too. I also hated renewing Corica, as I just said, for a rebuild, which seems about 3 seasons too late, and then re-signing their average first-choice goalkeeper in Redmayne when you've got Tom Heward-Bell knocking at the door. Sure, he didn't have a great season for his 9 appearances, but he's been very good traditionally, and Redmayne is just not getting any better, and he's just like petering out. And then losing more of their promising young talent. I mentioned Talbot, and now you let Ninkovic, one of the club's favourite sons, get into a contract standoff in the off-season and basically just let yourself become a meme club. So you hate to see it, or you love to see it, depending on who you are. Go on, Tommy.
Oh, no, I don't think you finished yet with your review, are you?
No, there's
right,
more. There's more.
Sorry, I'll let you finish before I come back to a question then.
So some highlights and lowlights. There were a few lowlights, obviously, given how bad the season was. There was a 2-0 loss to the Central Coast in December, this time at home in their the Australia Cup or FA Cup semi. They lost 2-0 in the derby away to the Wanderers. They finished bottom of their group in the AFC Champions League and having their season fizzle out with back-to-back losses to the VUC and the Roar at the end of the season. So a lot of lowlights for Sydney FC fans. Some highlights. They did get some revenge in April where they got a 5-0 away win at Central Coast Mariners, and they got their own back in the derby, winning 3-2. So finish on a little highlight for Sydney. There's a little glimmer of hope there, but overall, we're going to be interested to see what happens with this rebuild because, as I said, it just seems to me to be about 3 seasons too late. Like Sydney, got all that they could out of those aging stars that have won them championships in the past, but they've pushed it too much. They've lost too much young talent, and now they've got a long way to get back to it.
Bling
Thanks,
FC
Colby.
turned out to be cubic zirconia, not diamonds.
So Colby, got a couple of great questions here from Ashley Williams 95. He some of them you've already addressed, such as what went wrong for Sydney this year after making 3 consecutive grand finals. But one question he does ask is how many years can you see them missing out on silverware for?
Oof. Oh, well, I mean, in the A-League, anything's possible. I will say that. It's a salary capped league, and you feel like almost every team is, a couple of visa or marquee signings away from really challenging. And we saw that in the Woo. We saw that, finishing 10th and then winning the championship. We saw that in the VUC, finishing last and then, challenging for the the Premier's Plate and going deep in the finals. So never say never. But they especially look like they've got a lot of work to do, given just how hard they pushed their aging stars, Wilkinson, Lafondra, Ninkovic, Bobo, like all, almost pushing 40. And there's some big names. And normally you'd just rely on your young talent that you've been nurturing to step into those roles, and you'd pepper in a few visa players and a nice marquee, and you'd go again. But as it is, all of their young players are just getting frustrated and leaving, like Callum Talbot, and we mentioned Slidey Boy at Melbourne City Tilio as well. Tilio. So, yeah, like and Heward Bell. Like, I mean, if you were him, you'd walk, wouldn't you? Like, they've just renewed bloody Redmayne, and you've been banging down the door for the better part of 2 seasons, and they're giving this guy another 3 years. Why?
Colby, I'll be shocked if Heward Bell is not at another A-League club next year. Like, I mean, you're both Brisbane fans. I think you'd both take him there at a heartbeat, right, ahead of Macklin Freak. Yeah. Yep.
And
good.
Jordan Nine.
Both, yeah, you're both nodding. The other thing I wanted to mention, Colby, before we move on, though, is how much of I don't think you mentioned him, but how much of a difference do you think, and do you think they still would have, or do you think they would have made finals if it weren't for Luke Bratton's injury?
Oh, I think it did make a big difference. Tough to say that he was the difference between them making finals or not, but yeah, certainly huge hole to fill in midfield.
Okay. All right. Next up is going to be me with Perth Glory, and I mean, pretty much Perth Glory's season couldn't have gone any worse, really. They were 9th last year, already coming off a pretty low base, but this year, obviously, they signed Daniel Sturridge, and everyone thought that things would be a little bit different this year with Keogh, Fornaroli, and Sturridge, but basically that was the high point of their season before it even started. So they ended up finishing 12th. Richie Garcia was pretty much everyone's favourite everyone except for Jesse. Everyone's favourite, except for Jesse, for the first manager to be sacked was Richie Garcia, and it ended up being the way that things turned out. So fail from Richie Garcia, decent squad. They probably shouldn't have finished 12th, but I don't think anyone's surprised that they definitely didn't make finals. It's going to be very interesting to see how things pan out for Ruben Zadkovic. He's been confirmed as their manager for next season, so it'd be very interested to see how that pans out. Because all right, I won't jump the gun on the season preview pod coming up in a couple of months. But all right, what did I love and what did I hate about them this season? Not much really to enjoy. They failed to get anything out of Sturridge besides one good home crowd at the beginning of the season, and they virtually got nothing out of him sort of off the pitch. If there's one thing that I think the A-League needs to do better regarding marquees, and that's to basically get those marquees out to every Adidas or Nike or Puma store or whatever it is, and get them out there signing autographs, so that like you're in whatever city it is, so that they're in like that main shopping strip, and just the people see them. Because you see a queue out the front of like a Nike or an Adidas store, and people will go, "Oh, what's going on there?" Right? It generates a little bit of buzz, and I feel like this is kind of ridiculous that I'm even sort of suggesting this as sort of a groundbreaking idea. But someone like Daniel Sturridge, who at his peak, and Colby, you and Jesse were both in this boat where you both had quite a sentimental attachment to this guy, right? Like, he gave you a lot of great memories, and you wanted to go and see him, and yeah, you knew that you're not going to be seeing the same Daniel Sturridge from sort of 15, 16 in the Premier League, but you still wanted to see him in the flesh, kind of thing. And so it was very disappointing to see how little they got out of him on and off the pitch. Obviously, a massive low light for them as well was just the struggles they had with just the lockdown situation in Perth and WA this year. Obviously, that was hugely frustrating for the club, and I mean, they were basically in lockdown over Christmas in Queensland, and almost unable to get home. I think the club ended up pulling some strings and ended up getting them home on a charter flight, which was probably maybe was their highlight of the season, was being able to briefly go home. In terms of the other lowlights, though, I mentioned Sturridge's fitness, just really disappointing, obviously, for the club. They got 4 points from a combined 16 games in the second half of the season. that's super, super grim. They lost their captain and probably who, personally speaking, I was expecting to be a great signing for them, Brandon O'Neill, to injury midway through the season. But look, in terms of highlights of their 4 victories, 3 of them came against Melbourne City, Sydney, and Victory, which, I mean, they all had sort of, well, apart from Sydney, the 2 Melbourne clubs obviously had very good seasons, so beating them were 2 positives. The emergence of Callum Timmins, who ended up getting picked for the All Stars team, was probably another bit of a highlight. But again, I'm clutching here. This was a team that just nothing much worked for them this year. Nothing much panned out for them, and they probably just can't wait for next season to start so they can sort of set the record straight. And I'm sure they'll be very, very hungry to do so under Ruben Zatkovich next season. All right, next up, though, is going to be Newcastle with Colby. Take it away.
Thanks, Tommie. Newey finished in 9th this season after finishing 11th the season before. So while it looks on the face of it that the needle hasn't moved much, I think that that a lot of that is under the radar. I think they're a lot better than that 9th place finish lets on. So this is Arthur Papas' first full season. As we said in the preview, there was a squad overhaul in the off-season, which saw the Jets bring in more than 10 new recruits, including Yerman, Jordan Elsey, Daniel Pena, Beckel Mikkeltadze, and Olivier Bumal. In terms of whether they were a pass or a fail for squad and manager, squad, I would give a pass mark to the attack and a fail to the defence. Mikkeltadze played nearly every game and gave Macra a run for the Golden Boot with 13 goals. Pena, Thurgate, and Valentino Ewell also very good, chipping in with goals between them. Archie Goodwin, good to see him slowly getting more minutes and being eased back in. But then the defence, Jordan Elsey and Matt Yerman on paper look like they're going to be a really solid centre-back pairing. But together with Jack Duncan, they just ship too many goals at the back, and there are a lot of mistakes made along the way, a lot of errors leading to goal between the 3 of them. So I definitely have to give the defence a fail rating based on that. In terms of the manager, Arthur Papas, would definitely give him a pass. As I said, 9th, it just doesn't show how good they were in games. They scored the 2nd most goals. Their goal difference was +2. So Sydney, Mac Bulls, and Wellington, who finished above them, all had negative goal difference. So they, on those performances, they were in nearly every game they played. They could have been a lot higher, and I think they will be next season. Not to preempt the season preview, but if they keep going and if Papas tinkers with his squad even more, I think you will see them, shooting up the ladder and challenging for finals in future seasons. Loved the attacking football they played. Mikkeltadze, think he's all of our boy. At 24, I think he could be the next Besart Berisha kind of player in the A-League. He's
10 years.
Good. If he sticks around and gets into a good run at some clubs, like he couldn't he? He's 24. And he's just got that passion and, clearly got an eye for goals. So I do think he could be that kind of a player for the league. The Jets fans, though, they just would have hated shipping goals for fun. 43 conceded. And that was just the difference between their ladder position. Like, they could have been so much higher up and really pushing this season. So that really let them down. A few lowlights. They lost to the Mac Bulls back in December after being ahead in that game where the Mac Bulls had Curto sent off after the Jets went up 1-0. So they went up 1-0 and they had a man advantage, and then the Mac Bulls came back to win. So that was a low light. But that wouldn't have hurt as much as losing back-to-back F3 derbies at the end of the season. That wild 4-2 at home with the Cummings double and a late Pena sending off, and then the 2-0 away at Gosford in the last game of the season. So those were certainly lowlights for the Jets. Highlights, they beat the VUC away in Feb. Sure, the VUC went up first, but this time a red card changed the game in their favour. And the Jets went on to seal it with that Mikkeltadze pen midway through the second half. So not all bad for the Jets. And I think, there are plenty of positives. If I was a Jets fan, I'd be, pretty excited for next season, despite on paper, it looking like not the greatest season.
Good shout, Colby. I think it's a strange season that the Jets had. Looking at sort of the season that they had, they won back-to-back games once, but they only on a couple of occasions had back-to-back losses as well, despite not having a lot of draws. So, in a lot of games, like you say, there was very few games where there was more than one goal in the match. So yeah, will be very interesting to see how the Jets go next year. I think they're bound for finals, in my opinion. But all right, next up is me with Melbourne Victory. So obviously Melbourne Victory coming off a very, very low base last year, finishing last in 12th, first team to finish 12th. But Tony Popovich's side finished second this year. They also won the FFA Cup, which was sort of a nice little sweetener for them as well. So a huge improvement from last year, far more competitive, far better squad, and just looked a totally different side from the Melbourne Victory of the past 2 years. So definitely a very solid A from both Popovich and the squad. And not really much to criticise Melbourne Victory on regarding their season, I think, to be honest. What did I love about this season? I love the emergence and the newfound confidence of D'Agostino and Johnny Warren medalist Jake Brimmer. Jake Brimmer looked solid the previous year. He was sort of the best of a bad bunch, but this year I thought he really stood up and was consistently good and contributed. And it's probably a bit of a smoky even to go to the World Cup because we don't know if I guess the Roos will end up making it or if or what the squad will actually look like. But I guess there's still a bit of time for Brimmer to possibly even go overseas or anything and make a bit of an impression there as well. D'Agostino in particular, I mentioned in the season preview, was at a bit of a career crossroads. Well, he ended up top scoring for the VAC with 12 in all competitions, so had a really positive season for them. Highlight or low light. If I had to find a low light, it would have been their failure to make the grand final after being in such a good position into the return semi-final. And also, I'm not sure if you guys remember, but they had that real big lull after the FFA Cup final win where they had 2 wins and 11 games. And if you look back at that in the context of the title race, if they had even just a couple of draws in that run, it could have put them basically in the pole position for a run at the Premier's Plate. So I think when you put it into that context, they'll probably be a little bit disappointed that they didn't go one better for the Premier's Plate. But look, just a really positive season, I think, for the VAC, for their fans. It was great to get them back into the stadium. There weren't really any passengers. All of their imports were good. Ryan Marchand just seemed like such a classic Popovich signing. Probably the closest they went to a negative was Ivan Kelevar seemed like a bit of a sparring goal, but truth be told, he just wasn't tested in a lot of games, so it sort of worked out for them a little bit. And I think a lot of us here at More Than a Game don't love the idea of having a goalkeeper as a visa player either. So, especially with a lot of great young goalkeepers around as well. But overall, obviously, a very, very positive season for the VAC, and they'll be one of the favourites for both the Premier's Plate and the Championship next season. Next up is Melbourne City. They finished first last season, finished first this season. Back-to-back Premier's Plates, back-to-back grand final appearances, and basically only just sort of missed out by not turning up in the grand final on another Champions trophy again as well. I would make I think it's a pretty solid case and pretty unanimous that this wasn't as good a squad as last year. I think Craig Noone was a massive loss for them this year. In particular, I think he just added a lot of creativity, a lot of flexibility with that squad last year, and I think Kisnorbo really missed him. But I think Kisnorbo did overall a pretty good job with this squad. No Luna as well after he went to India, but I think Berenguer was by far his best season to date in the A-League, and he looked just fantastic for, I think it was that middle third of the year. I thought he was the best player in the league. What did I love and hate about this season? It was exciting to watch Matthew Leckie go from being an extremely frustrating player and a player who I was just yelling at week on week. And then he turned out to be actually good. And I think he ended up turning out to be, I think, third or fourth top goal scorer in the league at the end. Bit of a roller coaster there. And I didn't love Kis Norbo's newfound tactical pragmatism with no wingers swapping sides, no more inverted fullbacks. And I think some of this has contributed to this season feeling slightly disappointing, I think, for City fans compared to 12 months ago. Melbourne City obviously made their debut in the Asian Champions League, which they did quite well in, despite not making through to the knockout stages. And it was a little bit disappointing, though, that they didn't end up doing that in Melbourne itself, though, being the Melbourneites that we are. Highlights and lowlights. Highlights was Berenguer finally showing his full potential as he had a fantastic first half of the season. Really enjoyed Marco Tilio and Taras Kamolka's continued development. But the low light, I think, massively was Aidan O'Neill's influence. Firstly, it went under the radar. I think he had a really good season. But then his injury, I feel like City just never really recovered from that and sort of limped across the line for the Premier's Plate. And I think that was a big contributing factor to why they didn't win the grand final as well. Also, another contributing factor for why they didn't qualify for the Champions League and so on. So overall, though, a pretty positive year for City, but expectations are very high with the richest team in the competition. Next up, though, is MacArthur. Damo, we're back to you.
Yeah. Look, MacArthur had obviously we heard a few takes on them earlier in the pod about what we predicted they would do. And I think all of us, again, outside of Jesse, predicted MacArthur to be in and around sort of a title race or at least top four. And I know I said in my season preview that a successful season for MacArthur would be making the top four, and I had them predicted to finish fifth. And I said at the start of the season that they should be excited about the fact that their squad feels a lot more reliable and that they had signed players that had been proven in the league at other clubs. And I don't think that ended up coming to the table. I think the same problems that MacArthur had last season, they had again this season just gone, with their sort of unreliability, and they could go on stretches of brilliance and then stretches of absolute horrible. And I mean that's encapsulated with the start of the season, and they absolutely, were like a bull in a china shop at the start of the season. They were just they were off to the races. It was like Pamplona. I think they got 13 points from the opening 5 games, and they were sitting top of the league, and we were all sitting around going, yep, our predictions on MacArthur are going to come true. But there's a few probably things that happened in there, and I would say that a pass or a fail from I'd say it's a fail from the squad. I think there's more expected of this team on paper than they delivered. And I'd say it's a fail from the manager, purely because all of the things that have seemingly happened at the club, there seems to be like there's something smells not quite right under the hood. And, the whole issue around Mark Milligan was supposed to be going as a coach after he was a player, and he pulled out on that. And all these sort of, they were, to be fair to MacArthur, they were pretty hardly hit by the COVID situation. They had a lot of people out during that period in the mid-season. They had a lot of lingering injuries, but Milicic kept going back to this narrative about we've been hit hard by injuries. And all throughout the season, it seemed like either players weren't really seriously injured and weren't playing, but the club were saying they were injured. And there's a lot of things that were weird that were going on at MacArthur. And for that reason, I've given the manager a fail, because he clearly hasn't been able to build a culture within the club that they desperately need to get their feet on the ground. Yeah. So definitely a fail there. And I think what I hated from the season, the low-hanging fruit is saying De Vere. I love watching that guy play. He's so good to watch. Again, he was probably there their best player. I think he took pretty much all their awards at their end of season awards night. Top scorer, best player, fans award, all these awards. So, yeah, obviously we heard the news that happened to him and his family recently, and it'll be interesting to sort of see how that affects his football career, because it's obviously will affect your life in incredibly significant ways for something like that to happen. So, stay tuned sort of on that. But, it was incredible to watch this season again. So that's what I loved about their season. What I hated about their season, I mean, there's a few things, and one of them was the low light of the season, which was literally the first day of the season. Their game was postponed because the pitch was like a cow paddock, and they had to take it somewhere else. And something I forgot about until I was preparing for this pod was seeing the pictures of what the pitch looked like just hours before the kickoff. It's pretty grim. But yeah, look, there's in terms of highlights, there's not really many shiny things that you can talk about from MacArthur. They're a club that have got huge ticket prices, not many fans in an area of Sydney that wasn't really crying out for another football team, and it's hard to find highlights in there. The highlight as a fan of MacArthur would have been the start to the season and sort of thinking, all right, this is finally our year, and then it all just came crashing down. And they didn't finish the season particularly well either. I think they had a run of towards the end of the season where they got very few points. There was
3 of their last 4 games.
Yeah, 3. I think 3 of the last 5 or last 4 even. And there was a period there they conceded 12 goals in 12 goals in 4 games or something as well. So they just went on these horrible periods throughout the season. And I think overall, I'd say it's just a failure of a season on and off the field for MacArthur.
Really frustrating to see just such a stacked squad not really make any imprint upon the competition at all. I mean, you look at that squad and all of the ingredients were there for them just to go bang. And I guess if I can throw in my 2 cents, I enjoyed the idea, if nothing else, of Ulysses Davila, Danny De Silva, and Tommie Orr playing as a midfield 3, and Tommie Orr being the holding midfielder. I thought that was the epitome of optimism.
Wow.
But all right, let's move on, shall we? Damo, you're up again with Central Coast.
Yeah, look, Central Coast, obviously, we spoke at length about their season last season where they finished 3rd, and everyone said, is this a fluke? They've backed it up, and I think Montgomery can take a huge pass as a manager for many reasons. I think the first reason we spoke about it briefly earlier, but his recruitment of visa players and his recruitment of local players. He seems to know exactly what he wants in his squad. I think another good thing about Montgomery is he's shown that just no one gets special treatment. There's no favorites, right? And I think that's shown in Ollie Bozanic came back to the club, was given the armband. A lot of hopes are sort of pinned on him after trip overseas and playing for some rival clubs, and he was dropped halfway through the season, and we didn't really see him for the rest of the year. And obviously, he's announced, I think, that he's leaving the Mariners. So, so I think that just proves another thing about Montgomery and sort of the culture he's building there as a manager. So it's a huge pass from him, a huge pass from the team. They've got, they did some good recruitment, obviously bringing the Cum Dog in, as well as Benny and Kololo, both probably two of the best visa players in the season in terms of their impact for their teams, but also the 3, particularly the 3 young guys at the Mariners. You got Geraint Kuol, Jacob Farrell, and who is the other guy? Harrison Steele was the other one who played a bunch of games. So there's this conveyor belt of talent coming through at the Mariners that seems to produce good players. But I think, they did finish 5th this year, and they made the finals, against a lot of people's sort of predictions of where they would finish. But if you look at the numbers of their season, they scored 49 goals this year, which is their highest total of goals since their championship winning season in 2013. It's the highest amount of goals they've scored, the second highest amount of goals they've ever scored in a season. They scored the second highest amount of goals of any team this season. They got 42 points, which is exactly what they got last season when they finished 3rd. So really, the Mariners have been able to, you could say, improve as a team despite finishing 5th in the league. You could say the Mariners have got better and that they're only going to get better. So I think to be a Mariners fan, you'd be pretty excited at the moment as sort of what the future is, particularly when you've got, players like Garang Kuol, who's still around, who's going to be there, you would assume, at least for another season and have a bigger impact. But yeah, highlights of the season. The highlight of the season for the Mariners has got to be their run into the end of the season. I think the last 14 games of the season, they only lost 2. They won their last 5 in a row. They lost 1 in their last 14 games. It was a 5-0 loss, but still, they only lost 1. And then the final 5 games of the season where they won all 5 in a row to get themselves to, it was just really, I think, really unfortunate for the Central Coast that they came up against Adelaide, who were also in red hot form and won 5 in a row themselves going into finals. So I think, if it was someone else apart from Adelaide, I think Central Coast could have gone deeper into the finals. So all in all, for Central Coast, a great season. Not really many lowlights. Another highlight of the season would be making the FFA Cup final, which was a huge highlight for the club to be involved in a final. First time they'd been in obviously the Cup final. So I think an improvement on last year somehow when no one predicted they would. So all in all, a great season from them.
Yeah, another really heartwarming season, I guess, for the team that kind of everyone wants to see do well in the A-League, I think, maybe apart from Jets fans. But next up is Brisbane Roar with Colby.
Oh, another team that I think I'm over-reviewing, Tommie. I'm over it. Like, Damo, take them back next season. You're reviewing them. My heart can't take it. Warren Moon's second full season in charge saw the Roar finish in 11th after a couple of consecutive 4th place finishes. It was just a season of their inability to score goals and getting their recruitment just flatly just wrong. In terms of the squad, I'm not giving them a pass, but I'm not giving them a fail either. Henry Hoare and Jay O'Shea both had excellent seasons. Kai Trewin, great season as well. Good to see his continued development. But that's probably where my praise for the squad and or manager ends. The whole squad, it's just a bit average on paper. But in a way, it's not completely their fault for how they performed. Because the visa players and the others that came in that were supposed to prop everything up were just spuds, and a little bit disappointing that Cyrus Demi didn't kick on in the way that many Roar fans hoped that he would. Warren Moon, I mean, it's hard to say this isn't a fail. As much as I wanted to when I was writing this, I wanted to think of some way that this is not a fail, but you finish 11th, you drop out of finals. Yeah, you've got an average squad on paper. And yeah, they were playing decent towards the end of the season. And yes, they were in games, but it was too little too late by that point. And the intensity and consistency, they were never there throughout most of the season, which got off to a bad start. The recruitment was terrible. As I said, I'm not sure how involved Warren Moon is. I don't know how involved managers are in A-League clubs, club to club, like how, whether he has the final say or how involved he was. But anyway, he has to take at least a good portion of the blame for the recruitment. The visa players were failures. Juan Lascano, Matty Steinman, Rio Wada, who came in on loan halfway through the season, all absolute flops. And in terms of the other recruitment, Miliuznic, Nick Olsen didn't have an impact. And then the other point that you have to put on the manager. In part, I think part of this has to do with club culture, but also it has to rest on Warren Moon's shoulders as the manager, inability to retain exciting local young talent. Parsons on the outer all season, and just when he puts in a late run of games, looked to have recaptured that early form. One of the most exciting, promising young local prospects the club has, with every reason to stay and kick on, and they can't keep him, especially after the season before. Exciting local young talent, Dylan Wenzel-Halls, wanted out and got out. And both of those on Warren Moon's watch. And then club legend Jamie Young. You shouldn't be letting your club legends go in their twilight years. Like, happy for Jamie Young that he won a championship, but something's seriously wrong at that club if you're letting your legends walk out the door late in their career. We said it about Sydney FC. So, and part of that at least has to sit on Warren Moon's shoulders.
Yeah, it's a question I was going to ask you, Colby. I don't know if you're about to get to it, but we've asked the question on this podcast many times this year: is when does Warren Moon's job essentially become a question mark? Because there's so many points in this season where we have looked at each other on the podcast and said, is there really anything happening here? Why is he still there? Is he working on anything? Like, what's your opinion? Is what's the state of Warren Moon's job? And maybe that's more for the preview pod next year, but you know what, where's he sitting at the moment?
It's just so hard to say in the A-League, and particularly at Brisbane Roar. Like, you know, we Roar fans and followers of the A-League have known for years that this club has an ownership group that just don't give a shit about it. And more and more every season, I'm starting to just think something else is wrong inside the club as well, independent of the manager. The club, like the vibe that I get, if nothing else, of the club's culture just seems to be really off, and it just seems really toxic. And that was there before Warren Moon got there, but yeah, so it's really hard to put all of this at his doorstep. But yeah, there does come a point that the buck has to stop with you as the manager. I've loved, as I said, seeing the development of some exciting young players. Henry Hoare was just a revelation this season, out of nowhere. Like, he was expected to be a bench player and nothing more.
He signed a new long-term contract on the back of it too.
Signed a new long-term contract and played really well. I'm a bit scarred after Parsons, so I'm just going to, hold off and hope he has a good start to the season. Good to see Eli Adams getting some games towards the end of the season when all was lost and we could throw him on. Yeah, your boy Damo. So yeah, love to see the young players. Louis Zabala coming on as well. I think he got a contract. So that was really good to see that there's some depth being built in some positions. But yeah, hated playing the entire season at Redcliffe. Hated that we are only 4 to 6 players, a home ground located in Brisbane, a club culture that doesn't force legends and talents out the door, and an owner who gives a shit, away from being really competitive.
Just a little bit.
Wow.
So we're off it. But the club did announce they're going to play some games at Suncorp next season, so that'll be grim. Highlights. Beating Sydney at home and winning our Australian Cup playoff. That's really all I can say.
At least they're in the cup for next season.
Well, we're in the cup for next season. Great. Low light. I mean, the whole season, just put it in the bin. We lost consecutive games to Perth when they were at their lowest point. So that tells you everything you need to know. Over and out.
Wow. It's funny though. You look at. I'm looking at sort of just the breakdown of the schedule and results, and I guess you compare Brisbane with like MacArthur, and at least Brisbane, there's a smattering of wins all throughout the season though. So it does indicate that the players kept playing for the manager, right? And that's, I mean, if you're urgently looking for a positive, that's probably the one positive, is that they didn't just down tools at the end. So
we've always said it, that Brisbane's a hard place to go and get results, and Brisbane were in poor runs of form this season, but would still manage to nab a result at home. And I think there was a couple of really surprise results in there. They beat Newcastle, they beat Wellington. They beat MacArthur. They beat they all these games at home that they won. I don't know how many games they would have won away from home this season.
All right. Last but not least, we're finally back to the beginning of the alphabet, and here is Damo with Adelaide United.
Yeah, Adelaide. Last season finished in 5th. This year finished in 4th. So a bit of an improvement on league position there. I think there's a few things that went really well for Adelaide this year, and if you're going to give the manager a pass or a fail, I think it's a huge pass from Carl Viet. Particularly, I think because of his game management, game to game. Adelaide scored a lot of goals coming off the bench this year. I think Mo Toure and Nestor Irankunda both got 3 goals each off the bench. There's a couple of other guys that chipped in with 2 or 1 off the bench as well throughout the season. And we saw, particularly towards the back end of the season when Adelaide went on a really hot run of form, that their substitutes changed games. And you can credit Carl Viet for trying things and bringing players on that weren't afraid to just have fun and play football. And I'm sure that's what he said to, a 15-year-old Nestor Irankunda, just go out there and have fun. And he put a free kick in top bins after being on for 10 minutes. So, that's a huge pass for Carl Viet, which I didn't think he had in his locker. I didn't think, and I said in the preview post that Adelaide would just be a team of shit blokes because that's what their manager is. And I think he's proven me wrong. So that was another one that could have been in the tapes. But from the squad, I think you'd give the squad a pass purely because of how much difference in starting 11s there was, and particularly in the front line when at the start of the season, which was probably their low light of the season, I think the first 5 to 6 rounds, they had very few points. Stefan Mork had the big falling out with the club and left. Ben Halloran left. Their goalkeeper, what's his name? The guy that was number 1 that came from Delianov went down with a knee injury. Obviously led to the opportunity of Gauci coming in and having a great season. But at the time, he was the number 1. And then Yengi went down with a serious injury as well, long-term injury. And from that point, it was kind of thinking, when I previewed Adelaide's season, it was, it's not going to be anything spectacular, but I don't think it's going to be anything horrible. And at that point of the season, you were thinking, this is about to blow up. This is going to be a horrible season. But they managed to turn it around. So that's a pass for the squad to be able to come in. And particularly their number 9, obviously Yengi was out for a long time. And they had a rotation of maybe 5 different blokes that played number 9 all season. And there was Blackwood, there was Mo Toure, Yengi, obviously, when he was fit. Zach Clough played there. Ibusuki played there. They were relying on a lot of different guys to sort of lead their line. But I think the real sort of focal point of their team wasn't their number 9. It was obviously the should-be Johnny Warren medal winner, Craig Goodwin, on the left wing.
Here we go.
I think that's the highlight for the season if you're an Adelaide fan, he's a kid who's from Adelaide. He debuted in the A-League with Adelaide. He's gone overseas and he's tried to play elsewhere, and he's come back to Adelaide and he's had an incredible season, an incredible impact, and he's a fan favorite. He loves being there. He's got a young family now. Looks like he has no intentions of leaving Adelaide. It's got to be a highlight that you've got Craig Goodwin in fine form with really no intention to leave the club anytime soon. And he's back in the Socceroos, and that was his initial intention of leaving the country, was to try and get better football so he can play for the national team. That's all he's ever said, is that's why he wanted to go elsewhere to improve, so he could play for the Socceroos. And so I think that's a huge highlight, is the prospect of keeping him for at least a few years. The low light, you'd say it's disappointing to finish the season the way they did in the finals. They were on a hot run of form. Obviously, they came up against City. They 0-0 in the first leg. It was there for them to pinch it in that second leg, and it was a bit of a cagey tie that second leg. And I think Adelaide would be a little bit disappointed in not doing what they had been doing for the last couple of months in that one game. And I think we were all watching that game thinking City here for the taking, and Adelaide could definitely get them here. And they just didn't sort of pull the trigger when they needed to. So I think that would be a disappointing way to end what was a great end to the season. But the low light, like I said, has to be that start to the year. It would have felt grim as a fan thinking, oh, here we go again. Horrible. The media were on their back. Your captain was leaving. Your captain had bad things to say about the club, but that's what I spoke about before. That's a pass to the squad and to the manager for turning that around and finishing the way they did. So all in all, I think a great season for Adelaide. I'd probably give them maybe an A season if you're grading them that way. And yeah, I think it'll be up to now, can they do this again? And it's sort of the question that everyone had about Central Coast from last season to this season just gone is, can Adelaide sort of replicate this and in any way improve this?
Really interesting season, I guess, for Adelaide, just looking at their results and their season. So I think like a couple of teams in the A-League, you sort of look to A-League, not so much with this season's results in mind, but definitely with excitement to how they're going to go next year. And I think a lot of their fans will be excited about next year as well, with hopefully a little bit more stability. But look, that wraps things up, obviously, for all of the 12 A-League teams and obviously this season as well. So, and also this More Than a Game season as well. So we don't plan on doing any more podcasts now for the next couple of weeks, couple of months until the Premier League, I think, kicks off again. But look, it's been lots of fun.
Unless we dump an Emergency Ruse podcast in there at some point.
Let's face it, we're either going to be crying into the podcast for 30 minutes or it's just 30 minutes of crying of relief that we've made the World Cup, right? It's not going to make great listening. So but look, either way, thanks for tuning in this year. It's been a lot of fun, just I guess us catching up, but also tuning in with the viewers each week and getting your questions and interaction as well. It's been, this is our 5th year now with More Than a Game. 4th year, yep. So not getting ahead of myself at all. But 4th year, it's been a lot of fun, and we're still, I guess, looking forward to next year as well with the A-League and the Premier League. So
closing in on 200 episodes, Tommie.
We are. So
176 for those counting at home.
Who would have thought?
Not me.
Not me.
Until next season, enjoy the football.
See.